This morning we are going to be working on the cutting, pressing, grading project. And so for this project you will need your 3 pattern pieces. So we have an L shape, an inside curve, and an outside curve. So you'll need those 3. You'll need your muslin that's left over. You'll need your see-through ruler, your pens, your shears, a marking device. I'm going to use a Sharpie marker so it will show up on camera because the pencil didn't show up on camera yesterday. You're going to use a pencil because we don't use markers on fabric. And you'll need your tracing paper and your tracing wheel. That's what you'll need, so gather your supplies. Okay, so step 1, we're going to put our patterns on our fabric. Remember when we learned about grain? The grain is the warp threads parallel to the selvage edge. So the arrows on your pattern piece signify how you lay them on the fabric, and the arrows always go parallel to the grain or the selvage edge. So we're going to come over here and we're going to put our pattern pieces on our fabric lined up with the selvage edge. Remember selvage edge? Lined up with the selvage, running parallel to the warp threads so that they are all on grain. You don't want your pieces hanging funny when you're done. We'll move that up a bit to conserve fabric. Okay, so once your arrows are going the right direction and everything's laid out nicely, you're going to pin them to the table. So you don't need a whole bunch of pins, just one at every corner. Oops. There. Okay, now you're going to take your shears and you're going to cut around each piece, following the edge of the piece very closely. Be neat. And remember that your shears have a bent handle so that you run them along the table. We're not cutting in the air. All right. Okay, that's one. That's 2. And that's 3. And then throw your scraps in the trash. Alright, now you can take your pens out. adjust where everything is. Okay, now just like yesterday, remember muslin doesn't have a right side or a wrong side. There's no outside to it. Both sides are the same. So we're going to have to make ourselves an outside and an inside. So if you remove your pattern pieces, then you use a pencil. I'm going to use a Sharpie so you can see it. So we're going to do the same thing. We're going to just draw little designs on the outside of all 6 pieces. So take your little packets, flip them over, and do the same thing on the other side. So this is going to be the outside of our project. So you'll notice when you're done that each piece has a right side and a left side. How they're opposite. And that's the inside. And that's how you can tell the difference. Alright, now that you've done that, we're going to do more drawing. So each piece now needs a seam line, just like yesterday. So remember, you're going to take your pieces and fold them right sides together. And now that you know what side that is, remember, the right sides have to kiss. So my stripes are kissing. Right sides together on the inside curve. Right sides together on the outside curve. Alright. Flip you back this way. And flip you back this way. Okay, so there. Now everything is all lined up, and if it's not, make it lined up. The edges that we're going to sew need to be lined up. Now on the L shape, we're going to sew this inside L right here. And on the inside curve, we're going to sew the inside curve, and on the outside curve, we're sewing the outside curve. So we're going to pin those edges together first. Just like we did yesterday. Get your pins about 1.5 inches apart. You don't need very many. These are tiny little seams. Okay. Now I'm going to pin the inside curve. Now remember, your pins have to go perpendicular. If you get a bent one, throw it away. No bent pins. Remember that your pins have to go perpendicular to the line that you're sewing, and the line you're sewing is now a curved line. So you have to imagine the line and then put your pins in perpendicular. Ow. Move this over here. And now I'm going to pin the outside curve. Okay, all 3 of my pieces are pinned. Now we have to draw our seam line. Remember, it's 5/8 of an inch, so you're going to use a pencil. I'm going to use a pen so you can see it. So take your see-through ruler, line up on that 1/2 inch line and move it 1 little square past it, and draw your seam allowance, just like you did yesterday. Alright, there's my seam line on my L shape. We're going to do the same thing on the inside curve. Notice how I'm using the skinny end of the ruler because it's a curve and not a straight line. And this goes around the curve easier. See how I'm doing this? Okay, just like that. And now I'm going to do the outside curve. And there we go. And there's my seam line for that. All right, now you're ready to sew. So we're gonna go to the sewing machine. Okay, remember that your machine needs to be on a regular straight stitch so that our tension is at 4, our needle position is in the middle, our width is on 0, our length is at 2.5 or 3, and our stitch setting is on the straight stitch. So make sure your machine is set correctly and make sure it's on. And then the technique that we're going to use to sew these 3 things is the same stuff that we learned when we did the machine stitching project 2 weeks ago. So remember when we sewed the square and how you turned the corner? That's the same technique you're going to use here, and I'll explain it again as we get there. Okay, so just like we did last time, you're going to put the fabric under the foot, lower the needle into the seam, lower the presser foot, do your back stitch first, and then sew down that straight line until you start to approach the corner. And as you approach the corner, you're going to do the last couple of stitches by turning your hand wheel so that you want the needle right in the corner, right there. Now remember, we're going to leave the needle in, we're going to raise the presser foot, we're going to pivot the fabric, and then lower the presser foot again and continue sewing. And then don't forget the back stitch. There we go. That's how you sew a corner. And then cut your thread. Alright, so that's how we do the L. Now, the inside curve and the outside curve, remember when we did the spiral 2 weeks ago and you had fits and fits about trying to sew around? Well, we're not having to sew around, we're just sewing in a curve, so this is going to be much easier. So the inside curve, we're going to do that one next. We'll lower the needle into the seam, lower the presser foot. We're going to remember to backstitch. And you're just going to pivot the fabric and follow the seam line that you drew. See me pivoting the fabric? And then remember to backstitch. It's easy. And then cut your threads. And that's the inside curve. Last one, outside curve, same thing. Lower your needle into the seam line. Oops, mine came unthreaded. Pause. No, I don't mean the camera. I mean, that's okay. I'm wearing my glasses today. I can actually see to rethread this. There we go. All right, now lower the needle into the seam line. Lower the presser foot. Remember to backstitch. Same thing, follow the seam line, pivot your fabric. Remember to backstitch. There we go. Done. Alright, and that is how you sew a corner, an inside curve, and an outside curve. That's step 1. Well, really, this is step 2. Cutting them out was step 1. Sewing them is step 2. Pressing them, which we will do next, is step 3, and then we're going to learn clipping, grading, and notching, and that's step 4, and then you'll be done. So meet me over at the iron. Alright, we're at the iron. We're going to take our pins out. We're going to clip our threads. Now, we're going to press these. Now, how do you press this? It's not flat. Oh, we have tricks. We're going to start with the L. Now, we're going to open this up. Now, notice it's not going to lay flat all the way down because it's an L, right? So we're going to start at one end and press to the middle. Remember to use your steam button. Okay, then we're going to flip it and press the other end towards the middle. Okay, so we've pressed it a little bit. We've pressed both ends towards the middle, and they're both lying a little bit flat. All right, so we're going to put this one aside for right now. Now, inside curve is next. It goes the same way as the L shape. We're going to start at the outside edge and press towards the middle. Use the steam button. Flip it over, do it again from the other side. Okay, there we go. And now we're going to set that one aside. Last one is our outside curve. Now, this one isn't even going to lay down, right? We have to have a special tool. It is called a tailor's ham. It is not a football, but it's the shape of a ham. So we're going to roll it on its side and put our outside curve on it like this. Then we're going to press it. See how that works? Flip it over here. And then we're going to get this top edge. Try not to burn your fingers. There. Alright, now we're done with this. Now, this isn't great, right? This didn't really work, the pressing of it. That's because we haven't done the next step yet, which is called grading, notching, and clipping. You have to do that step before it will really work and turn and make the shapes that we're trying to make. So, I'm going to meet you back over at the cutting table with our shears. Okay. So you have your drawing implements and your shears. You're going to use a pencil, but I'm not because you won't be able to see it. Okay, so with the L shape, if you pretend that these are all like pillows, like a little round pillow or a square pillow for a couch, we haven't made the whole shape, we've just made the seam for you to practice on. You would then have to turn the fabric inside out so that you could stuff it. Well, you'll notice that because they didn't press very well, they're not going to turn very well either. So here's our L shape, and it's just, see, it's just not turning. And that is because the seam allowance here in the corner is too tight. It won't spread apart and let the rest of the shape turn. So the way we're going to fix that is called clipping. So what we're going to do is we're going to draw a little line right in the corner, right leading up to where we sewed, but we're not going to cut through where we sewed. So I'm going to show you. This is clipping. So I'm going to clip right into that corner, right up to the stitching, but not through the stitching. Look at that. Oh, look. See? And now when we go back to the iron, this will be able to turn and become an L. Look at that, because of clipping. Okay, so clipping is the same thing that we're going to use on this inside curve, because if you try to turn it just like the L, look what happens. It won't. It's supposed to be a smile. It's supposed to make a smiley face, and it's not smiling, it's a frowning face, because the seam allowance in there is too tight and it's not letting it turn. So we're going to do it the same way. You get your pencil, I'll get my marker, and we're going to draw right around in here about every inch or so where we need to clip, where it's really tightly curved. Oh, you can't see that. Where it's really tightly curved, so we're going to clip in there. So remember, you're going to take your shears and you're going to clip up to, but not through the stitching. If you clip through the stitching, you're going to have to resew it. And I am clipping through both sides of the seam allowance. See? So now I have these little wavy shapes. They're waving at you. And once I turn it, now, see, it will smile. Now it's an inside curve. See that? Perfect. Now, for the outside curve, turning it's not a problem. It'll turn. But look at all that seam allowance in there. Look how bunchy it is. That's going to make your project look messy. So what we have to do with outside curves, instead of clipping, we have to do what's called notching. We have to take fabric out. There's too much fabric in the seam allowance. So we're going to draw little triangles, little notches, if you will, all around the seam allowance where it's the most curvy, and we're going to cut those out so there's a less seam allowance. There, and then we're going to take our little scraps and we're going to throw them away. All right, now when we turn this, it's not nearly so bulky in there. There's not all that wavy seam allowance. Can you see in there? See how much better? Okay. All right, now that we've gotten everything clipped and notched, there's one more technique I have to tell you about, and it's called grading. And we're going to do it over here on the L because it's a straight seam on both sides. You would need to do grading if you're going to do something like welt pockets, anything where you're sewing more than 2 layers of fabric together. So if you have especially welt pockets on a vest, a man's vest, so you've got 4, 6, or 8 layers of fabric, anything you're sewing a lot of things together, and you have all of that seam allowance in there. Okay, for just two layers of fabric here, we don't need to do grading. But I'm going to tell you about it anyway in case you need to do it for something else later. So with grading, the purpose of it is, like I said, if you had, we're going to pretend we have 4 layers of seam allowance. Okay, we're going to pretend that this is all of our seam allowance in here, that we're sewing a bunch of stuff together. The reason for grading is that instead of all of that in there being bulky, we're going to make it like a stair step. So we're going to take each side of the seam allowance and cut it down a little bit more. So for example, you know, just like we did with the flat fill seam where we cut away 1/2 of one side, that's what we would do here. Except if we had like 4 seam allowances all together in one seam, then we'd just cut a little bit. We'd trim a little bit off one side. Okay. And then we trim a little bit more off the next one. pretending there was another one here, and a little bit more off the next one, and a little bit more off the next one, however many you have, so that they're graded like little stair steps. I don't think you can see this, but we're only going to do one side because we only have two. And at this point, you guys are not going to be doing any welt pockets, but you need to know about it anyway. Okay, so that's grading. We've graded this seam. All right, now to finish, we're going to take these back to the iron and we're going to repress them now that they will lay flat for us to press. All right, we're going to start with our L shape, and now you'll see when we try to make it lay flat, if I can get it open, that it will actually lay flat. Look at that, flat. Okay, so all you're going to do is just quickly repress there and there, and then you're going to turn it and flip it so it's in its proper L shape. We're going to roll that seam back. This is just like we did the French seam last time, and press it into an actual L shape with the seam in the middle. See? Perfect. Okay. Now, our inside curve is the same. I'm going to start from this end, the less curvy end. And notice how that lays flat too now. So just go back in there and press. Make sure your little flaps are all open. We have a lot of flaps now. There. And then flip it over and pull it into the smile shape. Okay, and then give it another press. There, just like that. Now, our outside curve. I'm going to put it back on our tailor's hand and give it one more press. And it's like it's got a little mohawk. So you have to open up the little flaps with your finger, and then if you shoot some steam on it, generally they'll wilt. There. Okay. And then you can turn it. Flip. And then press it again. There. All done. Now all you need to do to turn this project in is to write on each piece outside curve, inside curve, corner. And then pin them together for me like this. Write your name on all three pieces and turn them in. And you're done.